we're going to pretend that the one remaining artifact of this 2 years of insanity is the mask mandates. And therefore, as we either lift them or promise that they are about to be lifted, you are now back to full-fledged humans, basically. And what this has done is cause essentially, those of us who don't have access to many of the things that we had access to just 2 years ago, because we have rejected these particular vaccines as either necessary or effective or safe in preventing COVID, we do not have access to a lot of things. And I actually think that Trudeau is an interesting place to focus here, because he, of course, is extraordinarily woke. He's like, the wokest guy to routinely show up in blackface that anyone can currently think of. Hopefully that anyone will ever be able to currently think of. But he uses woke as a weapon, of course, as many people do. And he's simultaneously doing exactly the opposite of what, if you actually listen to the words of woke, like the honorable fundamentals at the basis of social justice, what are those words that we hear? Diversity, equity, and inclusion. Right. And I was reminded of this in particular. And, the phrase that I came up with is it's this blind hypocrisy of the diversity, equity, and inclusion crowd, the woke crowd, if you will, when a long-awaited new performing arts center was announced that it's going to be opening shortly in the Portland area. And I was going to show the site and go through it, but interestingly, they've been changing the languaging on the site a lot in the last few days. So because I don't feel like, saying, okay, right now this is what it says, and it's going to say something different in a week or a couple of days. I will say that our local free news weekly, Willamette Week, proclaims that this new arts center is going to be, quote, a welcoming space for all art lovers. A welcoming space for all art lovers. Doesn't that sound amazing? I got excited about it. I thought, finally, this is one of the few pieces of good news. It looks like it's in a great place. It looks like it's actually going to have a wide variety of kinds of live entertainment. But a welcoming space for all art lovers? Nope, that is a lie. That is a complete lie, because you go to the website and you click on COVID-19 attendance policy and find the same vaccine apartheid now being practiced in some cities across all restaurants, places like Seattle and LA and New York, as I understand it. It's not the case in Portland. There are a lot of there are individual establishments that are enforcing vaccine mandates at the door, and there are many that don't. And indeed, like I said, with regard to this place, they have flipped back and forth between saying vaccine mandates, absolutely, that's it, or proof of vaccine, or a official formal negative COVID test. Home tests won't do. It has to match, your ID, this, that, and the other. And of course, these things are expensive. Right. In fact, you heard a story this week about someone who doesn't have this money to spend, but in order to give her son the birthday present that she had already bought for him, I don't know that it was birthday present, but the woman who cuts my hair wanted to take her young son to a monster truck rally, which she wasn't really looking forward to, but he sure was, and then found out, having already purchased the ticket, that there was a vaccine mandate, and she actually suffered a vaccine injury herself. Mm-hmm. So did not want to vaccinate her son, which, of course, him being a young, healthy boy, was the right decision. Yeah. But in order to rescue her tickets, there was not even a mechanism for an easy refund. She had to get him a test. And of course... And it cost a lot of money. I think it was $300. So a huge amount of money. Yeah. And, just the idea that they're going to institute these policies without considering what this is going to do to people who can't meet their
demand, because of course at some level the message is, well, if you can't meet our demand for proof of vaccination, then you don't really deserve our consideration. That is the underlying message here.
That is the underlying message. And this place and other theaters, which we have had tickets to, which I have had to cancel, have also been flip-flopping between, it's been vaccine mandates since the vaccines have been widely available to people, or since the population has been widely vaccinated, but they've been flipping between vaccine or you're out, and vaccine or a test if it matches, if it's PCR, if it's within 72 hours, yada, yada, yada. And, either way, it's untenable. And it's hardly about welcoming all art lovers, is it? And it's hardly about inclusivity, is it? Especially when you take into consideration that these are, again, experimental treatments that are not necessary for most people, are not safe for some people, and have efficacy that is dwindling by the moment, and even the CDC admits that now. And
just to go one step farther, the fact is the dwindling efficacy and after a very rapid point following vaccination, the fact that these things are not in any way preventing contraction or transmission of the disease means that there is no logic for requiring people who show up to have proof of them, because it doesn't stop these things from being spreader events.
Yeah. It can't, the idea that it is about protecting other people, that part of the story has completely fallen apart. And if you want to focus on whether or not you yourself are worse or better protected as a result of having taken this experimental treatment, that is a conversation that perhaps individuals should be having with one another. But at the public health level, the only thing that the way that the messaging has been pushed out and pushed and pushed and pushed has been about this being the thing that you need to do for other people. It tugs on the heartstrings, especially the female heartstrings, right? It gets to, and this is what we hear also from mothers telling their children, this is what you do in order to be a good person, in order to care not just about yourself, in order not to be selfish, in order to be a member of the community who cares about the people who cannot do these things. And that logic has completely fallen apart, and yet the messaging persists. And this is actually, well, okay, go on. But I have a perfect segue there to do what I wanted to do next.
All right. Well, I would just say that the messaging continuing on as if the evidence had not shifted on these vaccines it is hard to avoid the interpretation that something is holding on to these mandates because of their utility in manipulating us and in turning us against each other, rather than their epidemiological reasonableness.
Absolutely.
And that is the thing that we have to worry about, because we are watching across so many domains rights that are enshrined in our founding documents for a reason suddenly under fire like we've never seen it before. And this is happening at a moment when mysterious forces who swear that they are scientifically motivated are functioning in a way that cannot be defended on scientific grounds, and just so happens to have this other characteristic, which is it amps up people's fear. It turns every person into a product placement for fear. Right? That's what the masks have been, right?
Yeah,
like we're all broadcasting this be afraid message at each other, even outdoors, which never made a whit of sense.
Yep.
And so the point is, I think that the whole system is like a more sophisticated version of what happened after 9/11 with the security theater at airports and the terror alert system, which if you ever looked into it, didn't make any sense on scrutiny. Right. It was really just a mechanism for like amping people's amygdalas, right, when it was politically desirable to do so. And the fact that it suddenly evaporated without a change in the environment suggested that that's what this had been all along.
Yeah, I mean, you've talked about that before on air here. I do think that what I'm trying to say is something different, that we have talked about fear and we have talked about the use of fear, and what looks to be explicit, formal, and intentional use of fear now. And, we have posited that this was, in fact, part of the plan all along. And in fact, there is some evidence from authorities in various countries that they intended to use fear, that they understand that fear is a good way to change population level human behavior and individual level human behavior. But what I'm focusing on right now with regard to the vaccine mandates is that this has all but disappeared from almost everyone's thoughts.
Yep.
That unless you yourself are affected by this, even if you oppose vaccine mandates, even if you really think that this has the potential to bring in authoritarian horribleness, you largely are breathing a sigh of relief now, like, okay, I already don't have to, or I'm about to not have to be wearing these insane masks anymore. Things are finally going to go back to normal. And in some parts of the country, of course, things have been more or less normal for more or less the entire last 2 years. And when I say country, it's my United States bias. But in some parts of the country, things have been anything but. And frankly, this is a more worrying moment in some ways, because the de facto privately instantiated rather than government instantiated vaccine mandates are becoming normalized because they're becoming invisible. And we're not even arguing about it anymore. With the truckers' convoy, everyone was thinking about it, and they were pointing out just how awful and divisive and nasty and anti-democratic and authoritarian they were. And now we're not even talking about it. So I do want to please segue to the thing that I was trying to get to many, many minutes ago. Okay, go for it.
Well, I just want to say that it really is a tension between a unifying force and a divisive force. And that what you are pointing at is that even with the lifting of these mandates, there is this divisive instinct. And I will leave it there and we can segue. But it is that tension. And the truckers, which were portrayed as divisive, were, of course, unifying. That's the point. Everything is labeled backwards, right? The inclusive of all art lovers thing is apartheid. Right?
Yes.
The truckers who were supposed to be divisive were actually inclusive. And that's the thing, is you have to get used to a world in which things are labeled upside down, because that's the world we're now living in.
And that actually, that applies at sort of the individual level of, we are not the first to have said this, and we've noted it before here, but individual liberals, and we still call ourselves liberals, but individual liberals as sort of a class are much more likely to be smug and divisive and interested in mandates that are exclusionary and certain that they know you because they know one thing about which you believe. And individual conservatives are much more likely to be kind and generous and open to all ways of life and actually be interested in seeing what kinds of connections can be made. And, that's the opposite of what we were told and what we thought we knew growing up in the 70s and 80s. And there are certainly people out there who will say, yeah, that's always how it's been. And it was only from within the liberal bubble that you couldn't see it. And I'm sure that there is some of that. But I also think the degree of smugness and arrogance and hypocrisy is in particularly fine relief right now with regard to, we've now endured years and the schools are failing and the media hegemony is spreading, mis, dis, and malinformation in the name of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And these are the people who are spreading the non-inclusive, vaccine apartheid policies. They are the ones doing that. It is such a clear case of hypocrisy. It's extraordinary.